Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian show on POD TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today guests are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always. Oopsie. There we go.
You. And we have our man in Kiev, Ukraine, Ivan Kucherenko. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hello, Jonathan. Hello to everybody. Glad to be here today. And from Kiev. And actually, last week we had a really great and important holiday for Ukraine. Right now, it was Day of Defenders of Ukraine on the 1st of October. And I have a very special video about this day for you to watch today, actually. So we can start with it.
Beautiful.
Great.
Right. So every child can wake up safety, go to school without fear, play in peace, and sleep in warmth, not under the constant dangers of war.
We fight so the children, wives, and mothers can share everyday moments and life's milestones with their fathers, husbands, and sons in real life, not in cemeteries.
We fight for our land. Fields are not for landmines. Forests are not for trenches, and beaches are not for naval attacks.
We fight for everyone, for every child, woman, elder, and animal, for everyone who cannot defend themselves against the Russian occupiers.
We fight for Ukraine's internationally recognized 99 borders and for all the people who are currently under Russian illegal occupation.
Excellent. Very good. Excellent. And I'll tell you that this is very important for people to understand what Russians couldn't calculate before they invaded: the heroism of Ukrainian people, of Ukrainian armed forces. That was well beyond their convoluted brains. And not only them, actually, the Western advisors and analytics, they also escaped of them this very interesting fact. And I think Ukrainians are probably the most motivated, the best armed forces in the world from that point of view. Americans are very good force too, but
we don't have as recent or as vivid an experience of warfare as the Ukrainians do. And
you're welcome. You're welcome. There are a lot of wars around the world. When you spend $1 trillion in your military, show it. Otherwise, I would think that there is a massive corruption when you are using $1 trillion for nothing or just defending Canada and Mexico.
Sasha, you need to relax. You need to take a deep breath and relax and remember the fact that the United States has a much wider range of concerns than Ukraine. Ukraine has to worry about Russia. We have to worry about Ukraine and NATO and other areas of threat. We have a much wider range of concerns. But given that, Ukraine is able to teach us very valuable lessons because based on my experience in my decades of studying military strategy and history and wargaming, one conclusion I have reached is this: whenever it is possible to develop a new weapon or a new strategy, you're a fool if you don't do it. Someone else is going to develop that weapon or strategy, whether you do it or not. And we are seeing that right now in the Russian-Ukrainian war. We are seeing the development of drone technology to a level previously incomprehensible to anyone else on the planet. The Ukrainians are teaching us how to use drone technology to its full potential. And so therefore, there's also great potential for Ukraine to teach the United States and cooperate with the United States so that we too will be able to cooperate and enhance each other's capabilities. That is the most positive outcome that we can gain from the successful conclusion to the Ukrainian war. Beyond just the achievement of peace, which is always desirable, but we want to achieve that peace in a state of preparedness so that we are in a better position to prevent or deter future wars. That is the most desirable outcome. And only in that environment can Ukraine recover economically and demographically, and in all the senses that it will need to do so, because its Russian opponent is going to be in very bad shape. And we should not be in any big hurry to help them recover. Not until they've...
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jonathan. But what is remarkable that the one can only study lessons when he's teaching and taking that experience. And what we've seen, it's actually it's only my opinion, but what I'm seeing from how China and the United States are improving their armed forces. In my opinion, China is getting more lessons from Russian-Ukrainian war than the United States. For instance, with aircraft carriers, China moved their efforts to small carriers, not for the large number of aircrafts like everyone was building before, in order to build a bigger aircraft carrier for to put on it as much aircrafts as possible, and then it will be more powerful because it will be able to participate in more missions and be more effective in every power of the world, and nuclear reactor as a power engine, and etc. etc. Now China is building smaller aircraft carriers, which obviously are cheaper. They don't need trillions of dollars for them to launch drones from that, not airplanes. But United States is continuing to build great aircraft carriers like the new John F. Kennedy, which would be the greatest aircraft carriers of all the times to launch a large number of planes from it. For what? When everyone understood that the future wars will be drone wars, not airplane wars, because the parties actually will not be able to use their airplanes effectively like they were using them before. Russians, they cannot use their airplanes effectively in this war in order to make successful strikes on Ukrainian military objects or civilian objects they are striking, because of Ukrainian aircraft defense, which they were not able to destroy in the moment like Israel did with Iranian air defense. In case the party is able to destroy air defense like Israel did with Iranian air defense, of course, then it will be nice to have an aircraft carrier with pilots who can just fly and bomb everything. But what are the chances, for instance, that United States will be able to destroy Chinese air defense in future war? For me, there's zero, or Russian air defense in the future war.
Well, this is the key, Russian air defense. Remember, Russia is so big territory that effectively the air defense, in my opinion, there is around Moscow, maybe St. Petersburg, and I have no idea if any other city has air defense. So therefore, Ukrainian drones, they are reaching now almost far east of Russia, almost any territory. Actually, one of the
in Tyumen, the latest one was in Tyumen, which is far east, northeast of Russia, like 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. But these are drones, Sasha. These are not airplanes. If the greatest American aircraft carrier, John F. Kennedy, will swim to the shores of the Tumen, then of course Russia will be able to discover that in time to protect, probably move some air defense systems there. It will not be able to swim there unnoticed, like a small drone which is able to fly 2,000 kilometers between the areas of coverage of air defense. The war already changed, and the point is, my point is, and I want Jonathan actually to either to confirm it or deny that China is studying faster on this war and preparing themselves to the future war than United States are doing.
I want to agree. I agree in part with you on that, Ivan, because the United States during World War II did not produce. They produced a great number of aircraft carriers, particularly from 1943 to 44, and a number of those aircraft carriers were smaller air support carriers. They carried a smaller number of planes, so that in fact the United States could produce more aircraft carriers to be able to cover the larger areas of the Pacific. So it is not that the United States has not learned the lesson. They are in the process of learning it. The United States, all branches of their armed forces have lessons learned centers, which try to focus on the lessons from ongoing wars as well as wars in the past in order to be able to better prepare for the future. So I would not underestimate the ability of the U.S. military to pivot and say, oops, we've overlooked this. We need to be able to prepare for this. They're already pivoting in terms of drone warfare itself. So it is a logical extension to expect that the U.S. Navy, given its propensity for wargaming, for studying military conflicts, for wargaming possible future conflicts, that they'll continue to do this. And I predict that they will, within a year, I would say, you will see a noticeable pivoting towards these very things that the Chinese have been studying and trying to take advantage of. So I agree with you. I agree with you in part that the Chinese are in fact learning lessons as well. Now it's going to become a question of who can learn the lessons better, faster, and more effectively, and put those lessons into practice and production. That's going to be a great question that will only be answered in a year or two. We'll see what direction it's going. But it's a fascinating point that you bring up.
Yeah. Ivan, I agree with your point that the war is not just changing, it's obviously becoming a war of the drones. The drone is number one, number two, and number three weapon. All the rest are going tanks and the aviation, all that is coming distance, 4, 5, it doesn't matter what. The drones.
It's actually that change became possible with the evolution of communications because of the satellite networks, the Starlink communications. Now operators can actually operate drones in real time on very great distances, which was impossible like 5 years ago. And for me, it's like radio changed the wars actually. Yeah, because before the invention of radio and when it became available on the battlefield, you had to write a letter and send a man on a horse or a pigeon with that letter.
Carrier pigeon.
Yeah, in order to deliver your order, actually, and very great time could pass while your order to move troops like to some other direction.
And you better hope the person on the other end can understand the message you sent by carrier pigeon.
Actually,
yeah,
were much more reliable than men on horses because, as we know from well-known Russian novel, during the First World War. There was a very important message had to be delivered to the commander of the Russian front during First World War, and so he was going from somewhere around western Ukraine to St. Petersburg. And on his way in a train, he fell in love with a gorgeous woman who apparently was a spy for the Austrians.
The first intersect of a message.
So
for Russians, the most common story was that he got drunk during the road and just lost his horse, lost his message, everything.
I feel sorry for
It would be sad if it weren't so funny. But,
the horse was innocent, by the way.
Yeah, but Russians are moving back those all these technologies. They already have
because
horses.
everything else is getting destroyed.
Now Russians have not only horses but donkeys, so they're diversifying, and therefore they're becoming much more.
Well, Ukraine has like robots for logistics. Russians have donkeys.
They're very dependable donkeys, and they don't eat a lot. So this is why
the drones don't eat anything. So
and don't drink vodka, so they don't compete for vodka with Russian soldiers.
Really. Whew. But it's just it's amazing to watch, gentlemen, how what the Soviets used to call the correlation of forces, what it was supposed to be continually moving in favor of the socialist revolution, is now continually moving in favor of Ukraine in all aspects: political, economic, military, results on the battlefield. No matter where you look in this conflict, you see the correlation moving steadily in favor of Ukraine. And the Ukrainians just keep hammering away at the obvious Russian weaknesses: their oil infrastructure, their logistical infrastructure, their air defense. They are using their technology and conserving their own manpower in the process by using this army of drones as both a shield and a sword to be able to strike the Russians and be able to block the Russians wherever they are on the battlefield.
Well, except now, Ukrainians more and more are attacking Russians' positions, specifically in Crimea. And what they're doing, I don't know if they will start a land attack against Crimea soon. They may not. But what they're doing, it reminds me what's happened in Stalingrad when Russians prepared their counterattack. When they started with artilleries and rockets and so on, and it was devastating for several days. There was nothing but devastating attack. Ukraine is close to exactly that. Their attacks are devastating. There is no defense. Russians cannot do anything about what Ukrainians are doing in Crimea. That's really
and that, Sasha, as we have been discussing for what now, almost a year. It is laying the groundwork. The Ukrainians are laying the groundwork by attacking.
We are waiting for the Tomahawk missiles actually, which were announced.
All the Ukrainians are praying, "Come on, Tomahawks! Let's get those Tomahawks ready, and let's get those flamingos. Get those flamingos in production so we can strike deeper." And when they have those weapons and you start utilizing them effectively, we'll be very close to this moment will be up to the Ukrainian military, with the approval of Zelensky, of course, to initiate that crucial counteroffensive that will sever the control of Crimea away from the Russians. And once that is accomplished, once that visible operational defeat becomes obvious to the West, as well as to the Russians, then we will have a very sound basis for either the Russians will get the idea and sue for peace, or declare victory and go home. We don't care. Just get them out of Ukraine. Because if they don't, then based on the way the correlation of military forces is moving, the Ukrainians will be able to successfully follow up after severing Crimea from Russian control. They will be able to focus on the other areas in the east, in eastern Ukraine, that the Russians have been occupying. And the Russians really won't be able to do anything about it, especially if we keep up the economic pressure sanctions on oil, reducing their oil refining capacity, create ever greater gasoline shortages within Russia, begin striking Moscow, doing everything we can to convince certainly the Russian political leadership, if not the rest of Russia, that this war is not to be won. It is to be stopped, and they are to withdraw. They will be, and Winston Churchill had said, I've said it before, Winston Churchill had said that there's nothing that the Russians respect more than strength, and nothing for which they have more contempt than weakness, particularly military weakness. The Ukrainians successfully have learned that lesson. The West is steadily learning that lesson. President Trump, in his way, is also learning that lesson, because he has said, well, as Sasha pointed out, President Trump loves a winner. He loves to back winners. He doesn't like backing losers. So he's learning. He says, I've been wrong. He's quietly said to himself, I've been wrong. The Ukrainians do have cards to play. They do know how to win. So I better get behind the winner. So
I hope that he changed the sources of his information. He stopped believing Putin. He stopped believing Vitkov, which was flying to Moscow, and
I think we can even.
And heard of those fairy tales from Russians how they will back Donetsk region, occupy Donetsk region, like till the end of the summer, like their economy is great and sanctions are not working. I think that the time of all those fairy tales successfully passed, and now hopefully President Trump is listening more to his European partners, to Zelensky, to American intelligence at last, because I'm pretty sure that American intelligence has the real data about the state of Russian economy and Russian armed forces and their real possibilities.
It's very interesting. With Vitkov, you see the rise of Ukrainian drone power and variety of different models, and the sheer number of the drones that they produce. And United States with Vitkov demonstrate instead of drone war, it's becoming a real estate developers war. So instead of diplomats and generals, they have real estate developers. So he was number one, Vitkov. I'm pretty sure there will be more and more new real estate. Actually, his son-in-law, Kushner, he could be viewed as a real estate developer, although he is more into investments now. But before that,
we're certainly cheapening. The Ukrainians are certainly cheapening the value of real estate in Russia.
Yeah.
You can have what if you want to feel like a rich man, go to Moscow.
I'm wondering if in Russia people have the house insurance. Let's see if their house.
You wouldn't be able to pay enough for it.
No, probably not.
No insurance company in their right. No insurance company in their right mind would try to set up business in Russia. Not at this time.
No, but
and the insurance for the wooden houses is actually very expensive.
Easy to build, easy to burn.
Yeah, burning fast.
Can you imagine somebody sitting in our house and saying, "Oh, what the hell? I'm insured. My house is insured. I don't care."
Your outhouse is insured too.
Yeah.
Great. How much did that cost a lot?
Outhouse.
Outhouse. Yes, I know what an outhouse is.
I'd like to mention something. I looked at one evening the one of the Russian talk shows, Solovyov, something like Voskresny вечер, evening with Solovyov. Solovyov is outrageous propagandist. Really, he's one of the most, and probably the most, he's just outrageous. Really, I have no word to describe his demeanor, his position. But what's interesting was that there was one general, but already retired, His name was, I think, Hadarionak, and he was saying that, what are you doing? Where is your commands? If you see that these people cannot carry out your orders, you replace them. And if you will not replace them, somebody has to replace you. So he was talking openly about Putin. Oh, that was incredible, because it's a first channel, probably the most popular show in Russia, and there was a very open critic of the Russian chain of commands when they don't fire anybody. They just let them.
What's fascinating about that, Sasha, is that it is showing the increasing internal stresses that are growing within Russia itself. It is showing the fact that these Ukrainian attacks and the economic sanctions, the combination of all the measures put together, are starting to have their effect on Russian morale and the perception of their own leadership. This is a very positive development for Ukraine. It is also, I would submit, a cause for caution and concern to be prepared, to confront the Russians. If the Russians show signs of wanting to go nuclear in any respect, they have to be confronted. To borrow from an old Soviet analysis, where it says that only the threat of a massive retaliatory blow will stop the imperialists. Assuming that the Russians are continuing to mirror image that attitude, that in fact only the threat of a massive retaliatory blow against Russia will stop the Russians from going nuclear. So we have to be prepared the West has to be prepared to confront the Russian leadership with that possibility should they start to look desperate. And our intelligence community will be key in identifying those possible preparations. So this is, while there is much to be optimistic about in the current series of developments, and that just as the artillery was the decisive weapon in World War I, the tank and the airplane were these decisive weapons in World War II, and now in the 21st century, the drone is becoming the decisive weapon in the Russian-Ukrainian war. An amazing development, to be sure. Yes, but it is an amazing development, but a welcome one. So I would say that the way we need to be very, very vigilant and at the same time persistent in our current courses of action. And in order to ensure, perhaps some kind soul will be able to start forwarding our podcast to the Trump administration. It says, hey, have you heard what these guys are saying? I say, yeah, you better listen.
I'd like to mention one more thing before we finish, is that there was a so-called Valdai international forum of some kind. It calls Valdai, but it's never held in Valdai. It's held in Sochi, the favorite Putin's residence. So Putin had a speech there. He looks older and older with each his appearances. He's now not standing, he's sitting now in his chair while he's delivering his speech. And so he was trying to bring up the bridges with Trump. So he was saying, of course, if Trump would have been president, there would be never Russian-Ukrainian war. It would be a peaceful coexistence. And it's still not too late to talk about peace. So I never heard Putin be so peaceful as just a couple of days ago.
Amazing. Well, that means if you use Churchill's logic, that means that that Putin has now been sufficiently impressed, by, perhaps intimidated, by the united show of strength that is being demonstrated by the West in the economic, military, and political sectors. So now he's starting to, instead of being the big bully or trying to brandish his nuclear arsenal, trying to play on Western fears of nuclear escalation, now he's starting to sound reasonable. Oh, yeah, he's starting to sound reasonable because he's afraid of getting the living daylights beat out of him.
Okay, they've divided duties. Now he has Medvedev, his doggy, who barks about nuclear arsenal and all other nonsense. And Putin is very restrained, and he still praises Trump. And he says there is no problem that we can still have a peace with Ukraine or so on. But interestingly enough, that Ukraine didn't reply to that so-called peace initiative by Putin. Ivan, have you heard anything that Zelensky, did he reply to that?
Those peace initiatives, they're like give me everything and I will give you nothing. They're bullshit. And the real peace initiatives from Russia, which actually can be negotiable, they will arrive when Russian economy and Russian military positions will decrease. Obviously, it will be the next year, because I'm not sure that this year Ukraine will manage to initiate any large counteroffensive operation like in Crimea we are talking about, because in Ukraine is already the weather is going worse. There are rains and the mud on the fields, on the roads. So the military vehicles.
That's both good. That's both good and bad.
Yeah, and don't like bad weather. Remember that.
It won't stop the drones, though. That the one thing, the weather won't necessarily stop the use of drones to continue to put the pressure on Russia.
It will continue, but some major attacks, major operations, they will be obviously postponed till the next year, like May or June. I think not earlier actually, but it will depend on the weather. And the sea operation in Crimea, I am not sure also is possible, because the water in the Black Sea, the temperature of the water in the Black Sea is also decreasing, and it will not be very comfort conditions for Ukrainian army to arrange any major operation there. But for drones, the temperature of water is not important for the sea drones. We've recently seen
the drones don't care.
How sea drones had successfully attacked the Russian oil infrastructure in Sochi, on the Russian Black Sea shore. So I think that such operations will continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's important to have in mind that the political situation in Europe is changing somewhat with recent election in Czech Republic. For example, it's unclear whether they will change its course to support the Ukraine. I really hope that it will remain the same. But what's interesting is that the Western powers, specifically Germany, they are ratcheting up the production of all weapons, all ammunition, and they're supplying Ukraine, and they are really behind supporting Ukraine as a whole, really, although there are some opposition parties or so on, but they're not influential in Germany at all. And Germany is essentially right now locomotive of supplying Ukraine with everything necessary. And Ukraine is doing, as a result of it, Ukraine is doing very well with weapons. And what's so interesting, while we are discussing attack on Crimea or somewhere else, all Ukraine has to do is just hold the front line, and that's it. Russia will collapse on its own. They don't even need these drones. They don't need to just hold the front line. And that's donkeys and all other stuff. And just wait until maybe even later on this year, but for sure next year, Russian economy will collapse. I was listening to some really great economists like Dr. Lipsitz, and he analyzed all Russian economy by sectors. And not a single sector he thinks could survive by during next year. Not a single one. Everything will collapse.
And so what the beautiful thing about that, Sasha, is that based upon what the projections of what you and Ivan have been making, is that by I would say the early spring of next year, events will have reached a point where Ukraine is approaching its maximum strength, has reached its peak strength, and the Russians will be near a state of collapse. Given the convergence of those events, that they could, as you say, the Ukrainians could launch a limited counteroffensive by the end of this year to take back one sector or two or make further gains in the east. But the decisive counteroffensive looks as if it is going to occur probably in the spring of next year, March, April, when the weather begins clearing up and major offensive operations become possible. That will be a decisive period, and God willing, I will certainly be around to see that. We'll all be around to see that, and to see the final collapse of the Russian offensive in Ukraine, and the final military and political triumph of Ukraine in the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Hopefully not only Russian offensive, but Russia itself.
Well, that would be a nice bonus, Ivan. that would be a nice bonus. You'd have to be a little patient on that one. You have to wait for the Russian military, those forces, to return home to a very angry population. And you will see
it's a dream of every Ukrainian, and I think a lot of people in the world as well. So we'll see.
So we just have to be patient and persistent.
The more 200s are coming back home, and actually in some cities there are no available places in cemetery for the fall Russian soldiers, even to they have there's little cemeteries, and there were like 5, 6 maybe family monuments. Now there are thousands and thousands, and getting more and more. Especially it's not in Moscow or Petersburg. It's mostly Buryatia, Bashkiria. This some kind of a most in the east of Russia, especially in this national republics. So they have more and more people gone. So we'll see what will happen out of it. I expect early next year massive resignations of Russian forces. They will go and they just give up to Ukrainians, at least to stay alive. That's their only chance to stay alive. Otherwise, they will be all 200s. You know what I mean?
They will be contributing to the growth of the cemetery industry in Russia.
Yeah. So Lipsitz, Dr. Lipsitz forgot to mention cemetery industry. That industry probably is the only one who will exceed all expectations.
It's the only place for profit, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So let's move forward and to see what Ukraine will surprise us by Friday, when we will get together, same place, same time. And in the meantime, thank you all, and Slava Ukraini.
God bless America.
Glory.
Героям слава. Thank
Glory.
you. Bye-bye.
Glory to Canada and province of Ontario. Thank you very much.
And all other countries except
Oh yeah, all countries.
Iran, North Korea, and China.
They can just fend for themselves. God will deal with them eventually too.
Thank you all.